I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
This is Supply Chain Breakdown, and today we'll be breaking down the hidden costs of Integrated Business Planning, or IBP for short. I'm Conor, Communications Director here at Lokad, and to my left, as always, Lokad founder Joannes Vermorel. Now, before we get started talking about IBP, let us know down below. One, are you a fan of it? That doesn't mean that you love everything about it, but you're an advocate, a devotee perhaps. And secondly, do you think IBP has a place in an increasingly AI-driven supply chain? Alexei is our producer today. Get your comments in. And Joannes, excuse me, it's not Alexei, Joannes. Joannes and I will discuss those a little bit later. Now, let's get started. Joannes, before we start deconstructing, a definition to set the table. So today when we say IBP, what we mean is the original, I believe I'm using the Oliver White definition that you cited in your recent article. So we mean, quote, the formal way a business is managed with a monthly exception-driven process and a single operating plan that links portfolio, demand, supply, and finance over a 24 to 36-month horizon. Now, there are many flavors of IBP, the same way there's many flavors of S&op. Perhaps you have slightly different interpretations. That's what we're working with. Alexei, please drop that definition in the chat. If you want to challenge that, that's fine, but for today, that's what we're working with. And with that, Joannes, IBP, one plan approach, a single united vision. Before we get negative, what does that promise to executives when they undergo an IBP process?
The gist of it is one company, one vision, one strategy, one plan, and a completely aligned execution. That's this one. Let's everybody together in the same direction to achieve that. And indeed, if you go back, to the emergence of the, I would say, mega corporation in the 19th century, yes, it proved to be very much a challenge where as soon as you reach a company that gets geographically distributed, so you're sufficiently large that everybody doesn't even fit, in one region, it becomes very complicated. You can have people who produce stuff, other people who are actually selling other stuff, and you have mismatch, or some people are very good at selling something, but the people who are producing are not catching up, etc. So those disalignments can create a lot of complications. So it was this idea that they need to, beside the idea of having this unity, they needed to have like a glue. And this original approach of IBP was to structure the thing that would give cohesion to the company. That's how you had all those processes with monthly planning iterations, and there is a specific ways to bring everybody on board with a certain cadence. And yes, the fundamental idea is to get everybody on board on the same page. So literally one company, one vision, one strategy, one plan. The plan will be revised on a monthly basis. And then concert and use this plan as a commitment so that every single piece of execution is aligned toward this plan.
Okay. Well, this actually came about from a blog that you actually wrote last week, and I just want to quote to you from that blog, in which you said, and I quote, "I do not dispute the value of governance in relation to IBP. I dispute its sufficiency." So in a way, those words actually kind of make you sound sympathetic or even appreciative of IBP in some regards. So where do you see it actually providing help, or at least the appearance or patina of help?
So, I mean, the fact that the company at some point needs to think about having, a shared vision, for example, for the business, it obviously makes sense. Do they need to have a shared strategy, a little bit more detailed, etc.? Yes, probably. Should people talk to each other occasionally? Probably. You see, again, should manufacturing never talk to sales? Probably not. Okay. You see, so there are plenty of things that are just very reasonable. It is reasonable that you try to have channels of communications, and some of them are a little bit established, so that you can have that. It makes sense. So that's why I say because you see, if you say brutally no to all those ideas, that would mean what? You want to enforce the silos.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously this is not what I recommend. My criticism is that fundamentally it's this can get ritualized, and it can over time devolve this IBP process, and it usually does, into something that is very, very inefficient. And in fact, the true useful channel of communications end up this sort of those sort of rituals.
Well, on the note of inefficiencies, that's what actually led to the idea of the hidden cost of IBP. So as a summary for anyone who's just joining, because the numbers are going up, view from 30,000 feet, what is the hidden cost of this single operating plan approach?
Maybe one I didn't even discuss in the blog post is the cost of opportunity.
Oh, huge one, of course, yeah.
Again, the problem is that if you see, when people say we need to have one plan, because that's going to be the deliverable of IBP. The problem with this idea of one plan is that suddenly that makes you blind to all the stuff that do not fit really in your planning view. Yeah. You see, again, because when people say plans, they mean something extremely specific. They mean a series, a list of time series, aggregated at a certain level, and that's going to be the plan. So that's going to be the volume of activity per week and product category. It's going to be the turnover per week, per activity, or per region, or per so you will have the way you have your hierarchical organization of your company, and that's going to have a certain level of disaggregation, but not too much. It's going to be very aggregated overall, and we are going to take raw volume in units or in dollars. But the problem is that what if the market is changing in ways that are slightly, off your grid? Just business can transform among many dimensions. For example, we have been working with many clients, and one of them observed a transformation where the B2B distributor, and it turned out that increasingly, so they had first a relatively rapid move in the last decade toward e-commerce, where their professional clients went to order online instead of ordering the stores. And then what initially they were ordering to have their deliveries made on site, where they have the construction works. But gradually they realized, it creates so much complications, because sometimes the construction site doesn't even have enough space to store all the things that is received. So increasingly what they wanted was to have their big orders being delivered and ready for to be taken, but stored nearby. And that was a subtle but very important transformation. So that was essentially something like click and collect. Okay, this is something where if you think in terms of the classical time series perspective, it's not the sort of things that you will see. You see, and when I say problem of opportunity, is that it forces you to look at the future through the narrow lenses of the instruments, the planning instruments that IBP makes available. And that's why I say, you see, we have really to differentiate at getting together and discussing the future and thinking long and hard about the future versus establishing a consensus on the time series. You see, those are very, very different propositions. And when I say the opportunity cost is that it locks everybody into looking at the curves, and then you have a turf of war to steer the curve upward or downward. Instead of thinking, is there like deep transformation in our business that really change the very structure of the market, and suddenly we should not even be thinking anymore the way we were, because it requires, I would say, a deeper transformation.
Well, the thing is, so I like the way you're framing that, because again, we take an economics approach. You're talking about opportunity cost. Another dimension to the economics perspective is trade-offs. And on that note, there were many comments on your post, and again, privately when I spoke to some people about, hey, we're going to do this talk. Is there stuff you want me to ask? A general consensus was around the idea of trade-offs, and I've amalgamated. I gave to ChatGPT, here are quotes that people said to me, summarize this in a general sentiment, and it was, quote, IBP is not perfect. I know that. Obviously, however, I have to bring together many cross-functional teams, and IBP at least provides some direction. It's a common language, not a perfect tool. That's the language of trade-offs. So are you sympathetic to that problem, or is it orthogonal to you?
Yes, you need to have a trade-off, but again, do you come from a world in the 19th century where the only instrument that is available to you is essentially pen and paper and discussion? Or do you live in the 21st century where you can use a computer to compute those economic trade-offs? And my argument is that when it comes, so you see, we had the opportunity, and my criticism on opportunity was the sort of numerical framework that you have, those time series, they lock you into something that is very narrow-minded. You have very strict lenses on what you're looking at. And here you have another problem, which is, despite the fact that you put yourself in a place that is numerically very constrained, you don't even leverage that to actually do an economic calculation of those trade-offs. And that's also something that I found very lacking, is that it's very, very incomplete in this regard, where your plan is not explicitly financial. It's not explicitly economic. It is just about essentially projected volumes. That's it. You don't factor into the any kind of explicitly, I would say explicitly, again, those are not factored, all the cost and benefits that are going into those numbers. They are at best buried under the assumption that let you come up with those macro plans, with this macro plan.
Well, again, I just want to point out, I like the use of the term incomplete. Again, it's not completely trashing the entire concept, it's we can do better. Now, on that, there were, just for the sake of today, when we were talking about hidden costs, there were 4 now that you mentioned opportunity costs, but the 3 that you outlined in the blog, one of them was consensus theater.
Yes.
And you were arguing, that's a lovely phrase, by the way. I love the way that you write that, consensus theater. But in IBP context, and for practitioners listening, what is that, and how is it a hidden cost?
So the consensus theater is that, again, the incentives of the various people that take place are not various teams are not aligned. They are not aligned with the long-term interests of the companies. If you're part of a sales team, what you want is to sandbag everything. So you want to lower all the projected numbers so that you can exceed expectations. If you're manufacturing, that's the opposite. You want the things to be, the numbers to go high in terms of projected volume so that you can justify the investment into capacity, so that when you will observe the demand, you have the capacity to serve. So you have those tug of war that are taking place, and that's why I say consensus theater, because it is a show. It's very time consuming, and in the end, every single division still do a little bit the way they want. You see, the resource allocation, ultimately the plan is big numbers that will consume a lot of time for everybody, and then everybody keeps doing pretty much more or less what they were already doing before. You see, that's the crazy thing, is that the people will fight for months over a plan, and then sales keep doing pretty much what it was doing, and manufacturing keeps doing what they were doing, etc. I've seen so many companies where it takes like a quarter to come up with the IBP forecast. And then when I ask the sales team, where do you do that? Oh, we just throw it away. And when I ask people from manufacturing, what do you do with that? We throw it away. And what about the people from warehousing? Oh, we also throw it away. So, you see, and again, the problem, I go back to my first point about opportunity cost, is those discussions are sterile. You see, that's the thing. People have this tug of war where you are driving this one forecast up or down. It does not really inform anything or anyone, and as a result, it is. That's why I say it's theater. It's because it's mostly something that is quite futile.
You mean performative as well?
Yeah, performative, and it's. In the end, if we have to go back to what is real, and what is real typically are the allocation of resources. So, how is this thing connected to the allocation of resources and the fact that you want, if you have an economic perspective, maximize the rate of return on your allocations? The answer is none. It is extremely disconnected. And that's why it's and then it becomes also very bureaucratic because you have those recurrent meetings. It's going to involve a lot of people.
So you're outlining, sorry, just because you're outlining there just 2 points, because like they don't necessarily all fall under opportunity costs. There's the direct tangible costs of salary while people sit in a room and discuss things, and then there is the opportunity cost of what you could have done with the same resources had you allocated them differently.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so, and again, that's also when I was talking about the devolution of IBP, which I see pretty much everywhere, is that, yes, you need to have communication channels between sales, manufacturing, warehousing, transportation, etc., etc. But it turned out that the most important discussions will take place outside of those meetings. That's, you see, for me, that's a sign that all the executives of the company will bypass that so that it's discussed outside of the meetings, and that's where the discussion will be made. And the recurrent meeting is still happening, but nothing of substance is decided there.
But then the natural follow-up, as I'm sure many people listening are thinking, is if I don't use IBP and communication is necessary, then how do I execute those meetings? Like what is the alternative to that? So if I throw away or I massively amend my IBP process.
So first, I mean, when people say IBP nowadays, it's not just a process. It's actually a software it's a workflow that is sold to you by a software vendor. Yes. So you see, this is where the bureaucracy can get on steroid. The large companies have already bureaucratic temptations. You know, it's already very hard in a large company to make sure that whatever initiative that you have doesn't devolve into some kind of bureaucratic undertaking. It's extremely difficult because it is the way large human organization operate is that it is safer, not more profitable, but safer for the people inside to make sure that everything becomes process-oriented as opposed to outcome-oriented. You know, it's if you belong to a large organization, you do not want you as a personal individual to have anything that in terms of outcome that gets attached to you, because it's a big risk. So organizations are very risk adverse. So if anything is like outcome dependent, that means that when the outcome is bad, it's going to be bad on you, and so you take a substantial amount of risk as a middle manager or upper manager in this corporation. So the temptation, which is extremely strong, and that's what is happening, is to go for instead of being outcome oriented, you become process oriented, and then you would just say, you know what, we did it by the book, literally, we followed the process, all the steps, and so we are 100% compliant, which is, you know, super safe, and oh yes, the outcome was terrible, but we were perfectly compliant, and that's the temptation. And then if you add software, because you see, this was something to what I was saying, is that this temptation to have everything devolved into process-oriented compliance, you know, instead of outcome-oriented, is something that is already super strong. But if you put software on top, and software is an amplifier, you know, that's the thing that people don't realize, is that software tend to amplify the good and the bad. And with IBP, so there was already, if you just think, you go back to the version in the 80s, which is very much a managerial thing where software is very secondary. It had this kind of, I would say, this problem of bureaucratic devolution. And if you put IBP software on top of it, then you are just amplifying massively this problem. So you will just speed up this devolution massively, and you end up with things that get ritualized even more with the software, the workflow of the software steering the whole nonsense.
When you say companies can become disoriented. They should be oriented in the direction of making more money, but depending on what kind of process they undertake, for example, IBP, they might become more process oriented. Is that sort of suggestive of your argument against proxies? So the idea of instead of I'm trying to make more money, I'm trying to improve my forecasting accuracy, and then that's what my teams are oriented towards, but that might not necessarily move the needle financially.
Yeah, I mean, proxies are, I would say, a corollary,
like metrics,
a corollary of the sort of process orientation devolution. Yeah. So if you are looking for the outcome, then you have the perfect metric, which is rate of return or long-term amortized profit of the company. Yeah. So this is very straightforward. Now,
but that's not that common, though.
I mean, it is for any company except the largest one. It is actually fairly common. The thing that is the problem is that if you are in a large company, the problem is that you have so many things that you do not control. And again, the problem with outcome is that people will say it went bad, it's your fault. So what you want to do is that you want to take a metric that is under your control. Yeah. So that means that you will take a proxy. So that's going to be a metric that reflects your a step in the process. Yes. And again, you would say, oh, it's outcome, it's my outcome. But it's your outcome, meaning that it's not an outcome. It's just it is literally some kind of compliance inside the organization. If you say we want to have a forecasting accuracy, you would say it is. People will pretend that it's something that is equivalent to an outcome. So again, business performance, real dollars coming into the company. No, it's not. It is absolutely not. But it is something that is, I would say, a numerical artifact that is completely disconnected from business performance. And again, why are those artifacts introduced? Because bureaucracies loved numerical artifacts.
When you say numerical artifacts, again, numbers that don't necessarily express the underlying performance of a company.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just for anyone who doesn't know what that means.
It's a number that kind of reflect the bureaucratic perspective of this team or this team.
Yeah, so forecast accuracy, for example.
Forecast accuracy, service or for example, a percentage of customer request addressed within 1 day. Okay. But because if I tell you, oh, we addressed 99.99% of the customer requests within 1 day, people would say, great. Yes. And except that we just deny the request, all of them.
Yeah, well, technically, yeah.
So we are super fast at whenever there is a customer complaint, we are just going to reply instantly. We don't care. And so we can tick the box that it was handled.
But you're talking
poorly, but handled.
Yeah, exactly. But that's okay, obviously that's an extreme example of Goodhart's law, which I know you talk about a lot. And again, most companies, even if they wouldn't admit it publicly, would agree, yeah, that is a problem. Essentially, if we make a metric and that's the yardstick, people orient towards that because that's their job performance.
Yes, and again, people may not even realize that this, because those things happen gradually. If we take, for example, forecasting accuracy, what will happen is that people will start looking at, at the SKU level, our accuracy is so bad at the SKU level. So we are going to aggregate that. First, maybe not the day level, but maybe the weekly level, or still bad. Let's go for monthly. And then, monthly, it's still bad. We should aggregate by month and by product category, or maybe by month and by region. And then the accuracy start to look better. But you see, what I have done is that I started from the real problem, which was how much I need to allocate for every single SKU, every single day in terms of inventory, production capacity, etc., to a forecast value and a forecast accuracy that is measured at a super aggregated level, both time-wise and scope-wise. And yes, the metric looks better when you do that, but you're further and further away from anything that would be like the outcome for the company. And that's why I said you have this sort of devolution, is that, for example, when you introduce with software, those IBP software layers, they will give you so many more numerical artifacts, you know, and so they will just multiply the amount of proxies that look scientific, but that are mostly nonsense. Another one would be forecast value add, you know, layers on layers on layers of things that are no correlation whatsoever with profitability of the company. But thanks to those layers of software, you can have all of that. And then you can declare some people responsible for those things. And you just, again, inflate the bureaucratic structure.
Time dependent, we may come back to the comments on FEA, because I think it is something to cover. But to push on more directly, because again, I want to stay on track, hidden costs. Another one that you expressed, and it's one I quite like, and it's I don't want to get too philosophical, because it's not. It's actually a very practical one. But it is, as you point out, literally the way you view supply chain. So the idea of, if you have a standard, let's say a standard IBP process, you're looking at monthly meetings. Okay, which is what that means is, unless there are exceptions, and of course there are exceptions, you might have an ad hoc meeting. But as a general principle, if you're meeting once a month, you're deciding things together once a month, which means you're viewing your supply chain in like 12 incremental steps. You challenge that robustly, the idea of monthly versus daily, or possibly even hourly. So please outline that. How is that, and how is that a cost?
So again, it's just that essentially a good supply chain decision is an informed decision. And if you go for a monthly process, then you add 1 month of lag. You know, it's as if people don't realize you want, when you think of lead times, you need to think of all the delays, including the delay to come up with a correct decision. It's not just how much time it takes for your supplier to deliver, how much time it takes for the factory to process and build. It is also how much time it takes to get to the purchase order, get to the production order, get to the inventory allocation order. And here, IBP, it is extremely slow. I mean, 1 month of lag, and very frequently it's every quarter.
It's actually robust.
So it's
very long.
It is very slow. And then I also challenge how much information can actually flow during those meetings, because if you start assessing in terms of theory of information, how many bits of information, you know, how many channels of information can flow during those meetings, the answer is maybe a few dozens, and certainly not more than 100 bits of information. So
there's a ceiling to the economic perspective you can take, obviously.
It's not the economic, it's just the informational. How much information can flow through those meetings. And if you do the math, because by the way, that's something I detailed in my recent book. There is a chapter on information. The amount, you can quantify the amount of information in a mathematical way. And realistically speaking, if you do that about a meeting, the amount of information that can flow, we are talking of something that would be less than a kilobyte, much less than a kilobyte. So not only it is very slow, it lags, but the resolution information-wise is just extremely poor as well. So that is a real practical limitation. And when you think, if you think in terms of flow of information of machines, yes, not only you can have things that flow in literally seconds from one side of the company to another, but so instead of having a latency of like 1 month plus, you can have something that is much shorter. And on top of that, the resolution, so the amount of information, you know, the granularity of the information can be, again, if you use machines as opposed of humans and meetings, will be, if you use machines, it will be several orders of magnitude higher. And when I say several, I mean like 6 orders of magnitude higher. It's going to be like literally, quite literally, a million times more informative, just because on one side you have not even a kilobyte of information that can flow through a 2 hours meeting. And I'm very, very optimistic when I say a kilobyte.
Yes.
And on the other hand, you can have literally tenth of gigabytes, if not terabytes, of data that can flow during the same amount of time through your systems.
Well, again, because I do want to, I want to ground it as much in terms of costs. When I bring up the idea there of economics, I know that, let's say, to take the Lokads in our perspective, it would be, let's say, for example, you manage $100 million of inventory at any given moment. You have 100, or your supply chain manages $100 million worth of goods. Our perspective would be every single one of those dollars, if you were to disaggregate it, has its own potential economic return. So if you take that at a monthly cadence, once a month you come in and you decide in a meeting, let's even say it's a 4-hour meeting, and let's even say for the course of 4 hours, you maintain glucose levels and you can focus and you're superhuman and your team is superhuman. Realistically, how granular can your economic discussion be about that large of a portfolio, and then say with a straight face, we take an economic perspective? And I'm not being critical. I want to be clear about that. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that's unreasonable to ask of people.
Yes, and it's going. So what happens in the end is that you're very low resolution.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're very low resolution time-wise. So that's why you have this 1 month of lag. And 1 month is, again, being optimistic, because even if you have those monthly meetings, it doesn't guarantee that something pressing is going to be absolutely treated in the next meeting. So it can lag. It can lag much further. And then also in terms of resolution, in terms of how granular are you? Because you can have, for example, a category that looks stable, except that in this category, you have some products that are collapsing demand-wise, while some others are exploding demand-wise. And if you just look at the average, it looks just fine, stable. But in fact, it's a completely made-up stability, because you have things that are just that will cease to have any appeal in the market soon, while others may completely soon exceed your capacity to serve customers. And again, if you just aggregate everything, you do not see those patterns anymore. You just see an average that looks like, oh, everything is fine. It's just it's just buried in those averages.
You use the term like made up, essentially, like it's a made up kind of sense of control. Maybe fragile might be better, because it breaks, because like everything's made up, obviously. Any perspective that you choose is made up, I've decided it, but some will be more robust and some will be more fragile.
No. Again, when I say made up, you see, if I say I'm counting the number of units of this book,
yes,
this is a tangible reality. We can agree that there is like 2 units on the table, And if I bring a second book, I would say it's a different product. So if we count, that's going to be different units. So yes, it might be arbitrary in the sense that it's a man-made object, and that's another man-made object, etc. It's not, but yet it's not completely arbitrary. Now, if I decide that on the shelf where I have all my books, I'm going to do a segment for supply chain and a segment for logistics.
Yes.
That becomes, those 2 segments. Yes. They have quite an overlap.
Yes.
So that's where I say it starts to be quite made up, because
I see.
It's really about your judgment in that, and that's where I say the problem with those bureaucratic processes, that when you start looking at the way they segment things, for example, it is incredibly arbitrary. You see, you will have segments that are very arbitrary. You can, as a consequence of that, you can have a lot of instability where your segments look stable, but the reality is that you have tons of products that jump from one segment to another. You have tons of clients that jump from one segment to another. You have also segments that may not represent anything truly real or meaningful about the market. It again. That's why I say it's very made up. Is when you start slicing and dicing according to very arbitrary rule. I mean, a litmus test to do that would be, if I take 100 people and I recount those books on this table, they will all end up with the same assessment. You know, no question. If I take my bookshelf and I ask people classify those into 4 categories, and I take 100 people, they will come up with 100 classification. You know, that's why I say, is it really made up or not?
That's a good
is
analogy.
that would a different team, if they were to redo the work, end up with the exact same thing, or would they end up with something completely different?
Well, this actually, and I will push on in a moment because there are some audience questions, both from LinkedIn and YouTube. We're on both. But this ties into a point that you'd made before, again, about S&OP, and I think there's a bit of overlap in your sentiments for both IBP and S&OP. But it sounds like the limitations that you describe are what happen, or what happens when you take a high-dimensional problem, I think is what you said before, a high-dimensional problem, one that really should have computer and automation intervention, and try to express it through the mind of humans. Talented humans, very well-intentioned humans, but the human mind can only conceive of this problem at a certain level of complexity. And that is going to be lower than, let's just say, for simple terms, a computer. So then you have these very made up, simple, low resolution perspectives. Is that more or less what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And in the specific case of IBP is that it's now, when people say IBP nowadays, they really mean something that is driven by some kind of enterprise software workflow. So you see, that's where I say it's, and that's also for me something that is a net negative in this specific case, because again, if we go back to the ambition that was one business, one vision, one strategy, one plan, suddenly you actually reduce the amount of meaningful communication between the relevant parties. It is not the same to have the salespeople talking face to face with an open discussion with manufacturing, no agenda, just brainstorming and making sure we're on the same page, as opposed to have some kind of tug of war on numbers that are initially forecast but are going to be turned into commitments. It's very, very different. And the second one, which is this sort of workflow operated for software, I think is incredibly restrictive. So it's time consuming, and in the end, it do not really inform the various parties that much. It's on the contrary, it simplifies, it removes all the substance and the gotchas. So that's for me, that's why I see that very frequently companies reinvent on the side something that would be closer to the original idea of IBP, which was to have those line of communication so that we stay on the same page. But most of the important ideas that needs to be conveyed are not going to be numerical. So the software, your software infrastructure are going to, take care of making sure that everybody is on the same page as far numbers are concerned, because unlike the 80s, now everybody can see the sales and everybody can see stock levels, etc., etc. You don't need to talk to the salespeople to know if sales are coming in. You see that everybody can see that on the system. Same thing, salespeople don't need to be talking to manufacturing to see if they have extra inventory. The stock levels are in the system. You don't need, for those sort of purely numerical communication, you don't need to go through the teams. You can literally go through your software infrastructure.
All right. Well, my last question before going to the chat was going to be about one plan versus priced stance, what you propose. But actually, the first question tees it up. So this first question, this is from Daniel. This is on YouTube. As I understand the perspective you propose, it is to make the lens wide, to then make it narrow again and pick the most probable or lucrative option. If that's the case, wouldn't I come to one final plan anyway?
No, because you see, here, that would be true if we were to discuss something where the number of options was small. And you see, and that would be, for example, if you're a venture capitalist firm and you want to make one investment in a startup per month. Yes, you can, and then you will have one decision, and that will be your capital allocation for this month. Yes, you can do your meetings and debate and come up with a conclusion on that. And by the way, That's exactly how venture capitalist firms operate. The partners get together, they look at a deal and they say, do we go in or not, at which price, and bam, they strike the decision. Okay, but supply chain is not like venture capital. You don't make one capital, I would say, investment per month. You make like tens of thousands per day. So the idea that you can discuss the rate of return of the allocations altogether is you will never get to that. That's why IBP devolved into something that is very low resolution, time-wise and scope-wise, precisely because you can't get into the nitty-gritty detail. So what I say is that instead, you should be focusing on getting a consensus on the economic forces, the economic drivers, the way you should even structure those things. How do you, for example, how do you think quality of service for customers? We need to have an agreement on that. And again, it's just agreeing on the very perspective. And so sales might have something to say, but maybe manufacturing might have something to say on that, the quality of service. So when it comes to agreeing on those economic perspective, what does that mean for the company? This is where I think people need to bring to get together, discuss, and get to some kind of a consensus. But you see, as a rule of thumb, the idea would be you want to have consensus on the stuff that do not change, or at least do not change quickly. For example, the notion of if you are a grocery store, the market has been, I would say, if you're brick and mortar grocery store, the quality of service for an hypermarket today is not fundamentally very different from the quality of service for my hypermarket in the 70s. So there is stability. If you're an aviation company, MRO, and you want to avoid aircraft on ground, again, it has been like half a century. The problem of avoiding aircraft on ground is very much stabilized. Yes, we have the Airbus A350 did not exist 50 years ago, but the problem is not when you want to avoid those aircraft on ground, whether you're dealing with an aging Boeing 747 or a brand new Airbus 350, it's going to be pretty much the same. So what I'm saying is that you want to have those, to take the time to focus on what doesn't change, as opposed to have the humans involved in chasing ever-changing figures. You see, if you want to get to an agreement to something that the computer can refresh every single day, that is a little bit nuts. You want to have the humans out of the, I would say, high-frequency computational loop of your systems. People are never going to stay up to date with that.
All right. Well, thank you, Daniel. I hope that was edifying. This next one is somewhat long, but I'll chunk it. So this is from Boris Yushmanov. Hi, Boris. Привет. As for IBP, I'm fully aligned with Lokad. The definition can differ, but for me, the real question is, how is IBP used? For example, running day-to-day operations through IBP, bad idea. Using it to take the long view, assess strategic scenarios, make big decisions, give shareholders a structured view quarter to quarter, that makes sense. As such, IBP works as a strategic compass, not as an operational approach. Your thoughts?
We are getting back to the, I would say, original 1980s vision for IBP. Question is it what is being sold through the major competitors of Lokad who are selling IBP solutions? That's the key question, is that I agree with the sentiment. Now, if we look at what is being sold under the IBP umbrella, is it what's being sold, and will those solutions deliver that? And that's where I say my take is absolutely not. So you see, that's the challenge, and my humble take on that is that I'm not too sure if we go back to this original 1980s vision, but refreshed for the present day, where the information is flowing through the applicative landscape of the company. I am not sure if something like IBP really need software infrastructure and workflows. You know, do you should you? I would rather suggest to have it as part of the culture where people routinely talk to each other. You know, so they try to actively break the silos, but not necessarily too much codification, because again, if you codify those sort of things, you make it very boring, and then suddenly the information do not flow as fluently, as easily as it should. You see, there is this there is this problem that I've seen in many companies, is that if you want the information to be digestible by humans, the information needs to be made for humans.
Yes.
And what do I mean by that? I've seen many situations in large corporations where the documents that are being produced by this sort of bureaucratic entities are so incredibly boring that nobody can really get to the bottom of those documents unless you're a McKinsey consultant paid lavishly just to do that and endure the pain. Because you see, those documents are so incredibly boring that first, people cannot really manage to get through them, and then even if they manage to get through them, they will immediately forget everything. You see, so that's the problem of the effectiveness of communication. And my humble experience here is that if you make things very repetitive, very codified, you make them incredibly boring. And then in terms of communications, very quickly people tune out. You know, it becomes paperwork. People stamp the thing, and it does the exact opposite of what people intended to do in the very beginning.
All right, thank you. DM just came through, so I'm not going to say who it's from, but I will begin with the compliment. Big fan of the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to hear that. I'll start again. Big fan of the show. But I'd like to hear more about the politics. So our IBP has strong internal sponsorship. Realistically, how do you handle awkward discussions when you try to sell this economic view to a room of IBP owners? That's from the C level, by the way. I'm not going to say who, but that's from the C level, so put it that way.
And, so the thing is that, first, the economic perspective is very tough, but the reality is that you can bury your head in the sand, but you can't avoid the consequences of your decisions or lack of decisions. You know, for example, if quality of service is killing your business, and when you put $1 on that, you realize, oh, this is literally going to get us bankrupt within a decade. Yes, it is mildly terrifying. But what is the alternative? Just pretend that you can badly treat your customers and everything will be fine. You see, that is, or if once you put those dollars, you realize that there is a business unit that is really doing like a bad job, and it should most likely, for the greater good of the company, be terminated because the other business units are just fine. Should we just pretend everything is fine and wait until the entire company blow up due to the damage caused by this one business unit? Again, yes, the discussion, the economic perspective make it very blunt, very tough. But my experience is that, on the contrary, it tends to diminish the respective powers of politics, because suddenly there are facts and people have to face the facts. And again, unless your company is completely dysfunctional, most managers and executives in a company operate on good faith. You know, occasionally you have a bad faith actor, but most of the time people can be a little bit selfish, but still operate on good faith. And thus, having those facts suddenly makes people face the hard decisions. And now, the problem that I have is, if I am facing, an IBP, committee, that's, by the way, at Lokad, when we are trying to sell Lokad, we are not going to try to sell them to those people, because ultimately, if we get our way, these sort of things just disappear. And that's the case in most of our clients. Those sort of bureaucratic approach to planning, they just disappear. They are not needed. Not in the 21st century, where you have machines to do like the super intense low-level calculation. You do not need to have those planning meetings anymore. So that's a little bit like how do you sell, the automotive to someone who is the general stable manager, the guy who is managing the stables for the horses. If you want to sell an automotive, and now you're saying you're going to pitch it to the committee that supervise the stables across all the location of the company, I guess it's going to be a very tough sell. But really, here, I think in order to make it sense, we just have to sort of think of ultimately it goes to the decisions, the end games, those allocation of resources, and we need to optimize them economically. That's my message. And with computers, it can be done.
Well, thank you. I'll push on. This is questions from Alfonso. Isn't the real problem... There are many parts to this. So broad comment. Isn't the real problem with IBP that the framework is often misused so everyone can see it isn't working but no one wants to say it? And in that case, how should we, one, build the business plan so it is owned, clearly designed and aligned with strategy, and two, turn the outcomes of IBP meetings into concrete daily actions that truly connect to all functions? You kind of touched on that just now, I think.
So, I mean, first, when people say it's misuse, I very much disagree with this sort of idea. Again, we are in an environment where IBP is nowadays pretty much driven by software workflow. So here, we need to blame who is responsible, which is the software vendors. You see, for example, if after typing queries on Google for 20 minutes, you cannot find, let's say, the headquarters of a large company, who will you blame? Do you think that is your Google searching skills that are lacking, or is it Google who is just giving you crappy results and do not understand that you're looking for the address of this company? You see, I'm obviously making the case up. Google is actually excellent at finding the geographical address of the headquarters of any company. But just to press the point, you see, if a good software solution will steer the users towards success.
Yes.
If the vendor can just say, you know what, we are blameless, you guys are just idiots.
You misused it.
You're idiots and you misuse it. No, sorry, it doesn't fly. Not in enterprise software. It as an enterprise software vendor, it's really, you have to do what we call at Lokad the pitfall of success, so that the default. If you just let yourself roll the slope, you will roll down. So you see the pitfall of success. You don't have to do much. You will end up with a success by just letting gravity do its work. If the natural course of event is the pitfall of despair, where people have to do heroic efforts so that they don't end up into the pit of despair, for me this is a very, very bad software solution. Again, you see, good software solution will effortlessly kind of drive you to success. Bad one will you will have to be heroes not to end up with a failure. So back to that. So that address first. When people say it's badly used, I would say not really. My take is that it's badly designed, and I'm talking about the software, and it creates a lot of bad things. So it amplifies the bureaucratic nature of the undertaking. It makes it even more bureaucratic. It makes it even slower, etc., etc. And
do you want me to recap the second point?
And the second point was, sorry, because
so again, how do you turn the outcome of IBP meetings into concrete daily actions? That
yes. So you see,
this is what we're talking about.
The problem is here. I think the problem is what should be the outcome,
exactly.
And that's where I really the outcome of those meetings, and that's where I very much disagree on the idea that your outcome should be some kind of business plan. I very much disagree. Or some kind of plan. I also very much disagree. You see, it's...
more information
the problem is that it's going to be way too resolution. Too low resolution. You see, there is... Your business plan is going to be a joke. It's going to be something that is with 10 numbers, and that's it. It's going to be, again, extremely low resolution. It's if you are a venture capitalist and you have one investment to make per month, being super low resolution is acceptable because ultimately you say yes or no for one deal or maybe 5 deals that you're on the table, and that's it. But again, here you see the problem is that if you say that you have your plan or your business plan, what is going to be the granularity of this document? What is going to be the granularity of this piece of information? It's going to be, again, super coarse. You know, it's not going to be something very detailed. And thus, what I'm saying is that you're going to average everything like crazy. It's going to be something where you're aggregating over hundreds, thousands of products over many days. And again, that's the essence of this low resolution sort of perspective. And that's why economically it's not very profitable because you're not sharp. You are just averaging out everything. I mean, just think, what does it mean to be low resolution? Imagine that if I were to say, I want to install a new McDonald's in Paris. Do I want to say Paris as a location? It's crazy. I mean, in Paris, there are like terrible locations. There are places that are where you have streets where you have no people that are going by. You have places that are insanely expensive. But again, there is like no pedestrian traffic. So you need to have like a resolution that is incredibly thin-grained. That's going to be, if I want to have a decision, where do I put my McDonald's? I need to decide exactly this street, this place, and at this price point for the rents. That's going to be incredibly high resolution. And what you're doing effectively when you're doing this IBP, it's as if you were saying, we are going to, let's put a McDonald's somewhere in Paris and be done with it. Or put 3 somewhere.
Or in inventory terms, send some stock to Paris versus send this pen to that store at that price point and this pen to that store at that price point at this date. Like that's when when you say high resolution, you're talking about this level of granularity, correct?
Yes, exactly. Okay. And that's why when I see that, it's and again, bureaucracies they tend, who have been operating in this theater for so long, they tend to forget over time that what they are doing is incredibly low resolution. You see, they don't even realize, because it's not even part of their perspective that it would be even possible to get to the nitty-gritty detail of every single SKU, every single unit.
But that's where all the gains lie.
But ultimately, money is made or lost at the lowest level. You know, it's McDonald's make money one burger at a time, not through a macro investment. And saying we need to invest in this region. If you look at the capital allocation, they are much more granular, and that's where the profitability lies.
Exactly. Could not put it better myself. So to push on. Again, this one's from Alfonso. To be fair, there's a lot of back and forth between people actually in the chat, so these questions are sort of an amalgamation or a composite of thoughts. But if we keep areas like transport and supply chain strictly specialized and separate, how are major business changes like a new product line, a new plant, etc., supposed to be communicated and absorbed, if not through IBP meetings?
I mean, again, just think
strategy, really.
Yes, no, but again, do you think information should flow through your company through meetings? I say it should not. It should not. Eventually, high-level insights should be forged and refined through meetings, not thin-grained information. Just to give you an example, we have clients that are introducing thousands of new products every month. And how does the information, and they don't need meetings for that. There will be teams that introduce the products. It's going to be listed in the ERP, and then all the information will flow automatically, and a product can be introduced and will be stocked, distributed, priced, extra, promoted. And all of that is orchestrated largely through the applicative landscape. So you don't need to have people talking to each other all the time. We have, for example, clients that have large retail networks. They open and close stores every week. They don't ask Lokad. They just do it. We see in the system that there is a new store listed. We purge the inventory. We see that there is a store that is listed for termination at this date. We stop pushing inventory. It's, again, we don't need a meeting. The information is flowing through the applicative landscape. You see, that's the sort of thing is that like in a modern corporation that is digitalized. It's like, again, all large companies nowadays are digitalized. They have been since the late 90s, actually. 99.9% of the information flow through their IT systems, not through word of mouth and people talking. It's so you see that. So for me, this is the point of IBP. Is even if we go to this ideal of the 1980s, in this 21st century world, the point is not to convey basic facts about the company. All the facts are recorded in the business systems, your ERP, your MRP, your WMS, your e-commerce platform. So all of that flow through the applicative landscape. You don't need to have a meeting. Everybody has access to this information, or should. Obviously, some companies have dysfunctional setup and the information is not as accessible as it should. But fundamentally, this information should flow across the board without having any people involved. And now, if there is a meeting, it is to see how should we even think that. You know, again, what does that? In which markets are we even operating? Is the market changing in ways that redefine how we should be looking at ourselves? You know, there is many in the history of markets. You can see, for example, if you look at the history of Nokia, they completely missed the smartphone era. So they were like the leader on phones until they were no more because they missed the smartphone. Same thing for the Blackberries, etc., etc. So it's an entire series of manufacturers that completely missed the transition towards smartphones. And again, that's, for me, if we go back to things like IBP, this is the place where you want to discuss those things where you need to make sense, things that are not going to be reflected in the facts, things that are that precisely elude your codification of facts, things that are just beyond your applicative landscape. If you go there to just discuss mundane information, you're just wasting your time. Your applicative landscape just does that much more efficiently than people can do it.
Okay. Well, actually, speaking about that, I'm just trying to amalgamate some thoughts here, because one of the questions is essentially more like a case study. Like, could you comment, and I realize this is putting you on the spot, could you comment more or less on the kind of savings that the perspective you're advocating right now? Like, how much of the hidden costs could you remove in, and I'm just going to take an example, an omni-channel retail situation, 40,000 SKUs, 200 stores, etc. Like, obviously, it's rough numbers, but like when you're talking about you're leaving money on the table, it's low resolution, it lacks granularity. Are we talking about thousands of dollars?
No. I mean, here, if we're talking in a situation like that, you would have maybe a team of 15 people who are managing the planning.
Planners,
We first, we are talking of just pretty much eliminating those 15 people. You know, so that's just a saving in terms of salaries. Those people can be redispatched to things that are much more useful, such as to manage the suppliers more closely. You know, again, it's a value add of those people. So we eliminate the jobs. The people, if they have experience,
the need
skills,
to babysit
they can do things that are much more valuable. But the idea of having people who are essentially, you know, messaging numbers and doing meetings, those things are just gone. So it's in terms of cost here, we are talking about, 15 people, that's going to be, you know, the order of magnitude will be $1 million a year of just pure costs that you can remove. Plus, on top of that, you have the solution by the vendor.
Yeah, that unlocks the savings.
That would be probably, even for a relatively smallish company like this
mid-range was what was asked.
Mid-range, that would be $500,000 a year of just ongoing costs, you know, maintenance. That would be also removed. And then you would have the setup fee, because setup fee would be probably like $2 million. It's once. In theory, that should be able to last a decade, but in practice, it's in 3 years, it's going to be completely obsolete due to the pace of change in the software industry. So we are talking, I would say, of easily $500,000 a year in this kind of mid-range for the IBP software solution that you don't need. $1 million for the people who are kept busy as I would say, privileged user of this IBP solution. And then I would say on top of that, 1 million for people who are just interacting with this IBP process, because it's going to be all the directors that have to be involved for meetings that are not very productive. It's going to be a lot of people who in finance, in marketing, etc., who needs to touch base with this IBP process very routinely. And I say that most of this time is completely wasted. So I would say we are talking of maybe like 2 million a year of just pure friction costs that can be eliminated by just removing that. And again, you're not losing much because fundamentally this thing is just not delivering. You know, if you factually, for me, the things that was really the proof of that is that during the lockdowns, 2020, 2021, I saw many companies who actually took advantage in Europe of the incredible governmental subsidies that says if your white collars stay at home, no VPN, you know, they are not allowed to work. If they stay at home without working, you get a subsidy to pay for those salaries. And it was ludicrous, but a lot of countries in Europe, including France, did it. And what I saw is that companies, those people were deemed non-essential workers, and the companies operated like for 14 months without those people, and it went just fine. And you know that even without Lokad, it just... You remove those non-essential white collars for 14 months, and the company is doing just fine without them, which for me, you know, proves that it's just bureaucratic overhead. Companies are under the impression that they need it, but in fact they don't. And again, I think there are very few. Just do an Elon Musk thought experiment. You know, just think for a minute, how would Elon Musk manage your company? Again, Elon Musk purchased Twitter, now X, and he fired 80% of the staff. Out of the 20% that remain, half quit. So they are like at 90% less staff. And the thing is just working just as fine as it did before. They had so many layers of people who were just not doing much. That's a crazy thing that I see in supply chains nowadays, is that we have optimized incredibly everything that is blue collars. But when it comes to white collars, we have armies of clerks that do comparatively very little. And so that would be my message. Don't be afraid to just drastically reduce those layers. They are not what gives you your competitive edge.
All right. Well, I'm out of questions, but I did want to finish somewhat symmetrically on a quote from Mark Twain. I'm going to read it to you, and then you give me your closing thoughts. Quote, "A company doesn't win by agreeing on a plan. It wins by making better bets faster with eyes wide open to the future's unruly shape." You wrote that. It was not Mark Twain. Just to be clear, that was you. What do you mean by that, and how does that tie all of this together?
Ultimately, it is what you do and that is tangible that matter. You know, we have to go back to what is real. You know, if you put something on a shelf and there is a client that comes and gives you dollars for those things, it is real. If you have a fantastic designer that invent a new design and it outcompetes because it's so much cooler than the competition, it is real. And if you decide to pass an order from an overseas supplier, it is real, etc. So again, the things that are real are very important and consequential. And my message, especially with things like IBP, is beware. It is incredibly tempting in large organization to get lost in buzzwork. You know, that if and it is so tempting. And again, I think, you know, it's an organization are constantly learning how many ways there are to create buzzwork, and every single technological buzzword end up generating so much buzzwork. So things that are not real, where people again they invent proxies, they invent metrics and process and silos and whatnot. And so you see, first you have a bureaucracy that creates silos, and then you invent a process to break the silos. But through this process, you've recreated other silos, etc. And all of that is just not real. So my message would be, really think it through what is real and what are the economic consequences in dollars for the company. And if things feels very fuzzy, very meeting-ish, very bureaucratic, slow, I would say you should have red flags and think, okay, this thing is just not creating value. Again, do your thought experiments. If you were Elon Musk, you take over your own company and say, know what, I'm going to do the same thing with only 10% of the people. Which one would you keep and why? And that's a thought experiment. It might not be very wise. Maybe the whole company would just blow up. But it may give you a sense of what is truly essential versus what is essentially, complacency.
All right. Well, Joannes, we're out of questions. We've been standing here for 70 minutes, so we're now officially out of time. Thank you very much for joining me, as always. And to the rest of you, thank you for attending, for your DMs, your questions, the lively debate in the comments. It's great to see. As always, if you want to continue the conversation, you can reach out to Joannes and me privately on LinkedIn. We're always happy to talk, even about supply chain, whatever you want. Philosophy, we talk about it all. And on that note, we'll see you next week. Have a good week and get back to work.